We are told by Muhammadan apologists that Muhammadan Islam actually made the status of women superior to what is in the so-called days of ignorance. What are the facts?
Dear listeners, it is imperative that you be aware of the following not always recognized fact, that the entirety of the information that we have about the status of women in the Jahiliyah, the so-called period of ignorance, comes from the totally biased and unsubstantiated Islamic sources that for self-evident purposes of propaganda thus portray that period in the most abominable and unfavorable way possible. But fortunately, by studying and researching pre-Islamic poetry and the ahadith themselves, and despite their polemic, a different picture emerges which is infinitely more favorable and true, proving without a doubt that pre-Islamic women fared exceedingly better than the depraved rules and regulations enforced upon the female followers of Muhammad under Sharia law. It is very possible that the pagan Arabs used to kill female children, but this may have invariably been during times of extreme duress, such as periods of famine, hunger, and scarcity of food, since females become a burden on the resources of the tribe, while the males can help defend and acquire food. Muhammad stopped this not because he was being merciful, but because he allowed his followers to attack and plunder the wealth of all the other unbelieving tribes. The Muhammadan Muslim records themselves show that Muhammad's first wife Khadija was an excellent example of how liberated the women of Arabia were before his version of Islam. Neither she nor any other women were forced to wear a hijab just in case they may arouse a male Arab to lust for them. She was twice married, and it was she who proposed to the 15 years younger Muhammad, a situation that is unthinkable among the Muhammadans of today, who look for as young a virgin female as possible, down to 9 years of age or less. Khadija was an independent merchant woman who inherited the wealth of her husbands and did not need the approval of a male partner or relative to do her business. It was she who became the backbone of the frightened and vacillating Muhammad, who thought he was possessed by the jinn. It was Khadija who disabused him of this and made him believe that he was special. There were numerous female poets among the Jahiliyah Arabs, more than during the entirety of Muhammadan Islam of 1400 years. There were such formidable poetesses that Muhammad had to have at least 2 of them murdered because they satirized him. They were able to circumambulate the Kaaba naked if they so wished. They accompanied, supported, and exhorted their menfolk in battle with poetry and song. They were able to inherit all the wealth of their spouses without having to defer to the males of the family, as was the case with Khadija, unlike under Sharia. The poetry of the men of the Jahiliyah addressed their love for women as well as for their own bravery and sense of honor. Women of the Jahiliyah could marry whom they wanted, like what happened with Khadija, without anyone arranging and forcing them to do so, as in the case of Muhammadan Islam. They were able to adorn and beautify themselves without fear of molestation, since this would have caused wars of honor, which the Jahiliyah Arabs were loath to start. They were able to travel in caravans without the need to take permission from others, as is required in Muhammadan Islam. Some were lucky enough to get educated, unlike under Muhammadan Islam, which wants women to be just like domesticated animals. There were no cases of punishing adulterers, unlike those under Sharia law, which condemns the female, even when she had been raped, to being stoned to death. They were allowed to sing, dance, and drink wine, if and when so they wished, unlike their prohibition under Sharia law. It was Khadija's wealth, after all, which allowed Muhammad not to work and concentrate upon his perceived mission. It is Muhammad and his followers, the victors, who inform us of the alleged depravity of the Jahiliyah Arabs. Thus, we only have the utterly unreliable traditions of Muhammadan Islam asserting these unsubstantiated accusations. Unfortunately for the followers of Muhammad, the ahadith themselves, when studied carefully and properly, prove otherwise. In fact, they show that under Muhammadan Islam, all manners of evil and injustice have been and are being perpetrated against the women of Islam and all those who do not believe in Muhammad as the Prophet of Allah. Al-Baqarah 2.223. Your wives are a tilth unto you, so approach your tilth when or how you will. Muhammadan Islam relegates womanhood to the level of a field suitable for plowing and sowing seed, and the man as the tiller. The Muslim wife is only a sex object for the Muslim husband's pleasure and desires, when, where, and how it suits him. That women can be sexually violated in any manner, time, or place that the Muslim man deems fit. Women are invariably considered as objects for the Muhammadan man's pleasure and gratification, his plaything. Al-Nisa 4.3. If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with orphans, marry women of your choice who seem good to you. 2 or 3 or 4. 4.11. Allah directs you in regard of your children's inheritance. To the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. 4.34. Men are the protectors and maintainers of women. The righteous women are devoutly obedient. As to those women on whose part you fear disloyalty and ill conduct, admonish them. Refuse to share their beds, beat them. 4.43. Believers, if you are ill or on a journey, or come from answering the call of nature, or you have touched a woman, and you find no water, then take for yourselves clear dirt and rub your faces and hands. The Quran claims that women are so unclean and polluted that they are worse than dirt. Al-Ahzab 33.59. Prophet, tell your wives and daughters and all believing women that they should cast their outer garments over their persons. As usual in the translation and interpretation of the Quranic verses, the Muhammadan scholars, all male, created rules and regulations to humiliate and make women subject to the dictates of the Muhammadan male chauvinists under all circumstances. These were and are nefarious, oppressive, and inhumane acts of control and subjugation. I have absolutely no doubt that the listeners would be utterly shocked to know that nowhere in the whole of the Quran is there any mention whatsoever of the veil, hijab, as the covering of women. The idea that only a woman's eyes should be exposed out of her whole body is not only morally bereft of justice and equality, but is utterly obscene, repugnant, and totally ungodly. God did not create women so that only men should be allowed to strut on the face of the earth, not fully covered as the women. Another remarkable story is buried in the tradition that Aisha, the wife of Muhammad, related that he did not force his wives to wear the hijab, as in Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 8.257, narrated by Aisha. Umar ibn al-Khattab used to say to Allah's Apostle, "Let your wives be veiled," but he did not do so. Sahih al-Bukhari 1.301, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Once Allah's Apostle said, "O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women." They asked, "Why is it so, O Allah's Apostle?" He replied, "You curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you." Sahih al-Bukhari 1.493, narrated by Aisha. The Prophet said, "The things which annul prayer were mentioned before me, and those are a dog, a donkey, and a woman." I said, "You have compared us women to donkeys and dogs." Sahih al-Bukhari 7.33, narrated by Usama bin Zayd. The Prophet said, "After me, I have not left any affliction more harmful to men than women." And last but not least, the most accurate appraisal of women in Muhammadan Islam is one found in Mishkat al-Masabih, Volume 2, page 692, by Walid al-Din Abu Abdullah Mahmud Tabrizi. A woman is like a private part. When she goes out, the devil casts a glance at her. That is why women in Muhammadan Islam have to be covered from head to toe, because every square inch of their body is like a genital which would arouse the uncontrollable sexual desires of the Muhammadan male.